clock is ticking down, and only about 180 days stand between Britain and an uncontrolled Brexit. Soon it would be shorter, 179, then 178, 176, and shorter. The protective shield covering the EU's influential member from a failed divorce process from the bloc is thinning fast, and the ordinary Britons, whether Brexiteer or Remainers, believe that the months and years to come are looking very grisly. The fundamental questions still remain unanswered, and Brexit for citizens now means seeping into the newspapers, sometimes in leaks from secret government reports. Rolling waves of unemployment and steep price rises are at the horizon, and there is almost no guarantee for business in Britain. Almost 18 months ago, 43% of Britons believed that Brexit will be bad for the economy. A year and a half on, and despite the Tory government's efforts, such pessimism seems to be the same or slightly worse. A recent ICM poll suggests that 44% of people think Brexit will be bad for the economy. This comes as another survey by NatSen also finds that only about half of Leave voters, who now think that Brexit will be bad for the economy, would vote the same way again. And only 2/5 of Remain voters, who now think the economy will be better off after Brexit, would vote to stay in the EU again. Theresa May's plans for post-Brexit Britain have also intensified concerns among the public. As a steady pattern, British voters' confidence in the government's ability to handle the negotiations is increasingly eroding. Not so surprisingly, Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University, believes that Leave voters have become much more critical, with only about 20% thinking the government is doing well, compared with 70% who feel it is doing badly. NatSen polling organisation also found 57% think the EU is handling the talks badly, while only 16% believe it is doing well. Just like 2016 and 2017, immigration still remains an issue at the heart of Brexit. According to the plans already outlined by the Migration Advisory Committee, once the UK leaves the EU, free movement would end. There are an estimated 3.5 million EU citizens residing in the United Kingdom, making up roughly 7% of the workforce.
If you look at the number of EU workers, for example, in manufacturing, they make up 10% of the total workforce. And they make up 8% of all workers working in hotels, retail and restaurants. They're also concentrated in the services sector, which continues to dominate the UK economy, contributing something like 79% of GDP.
Although since the Brexit referendum the EU net migration to Britain has witnessed a dramatic decline, the issue of free movement is still a pivotal one when it comes to Brexit future arrangements. From Britain's perspective, the stance against EU citizens' free movement is softening. The ICM survey suggests that the proportion of people who think the rules on immigration should be the same for EU residents as those from elsewhere in the world fell from 74% in autumn 2016 to 59% now.
Although there's still quite a lot of uncertainty around what shape and form Brexit will take, I think one thing is clear, and that is that if we were to abandon free movement, this would have profound implications for the UK labour market. Firstly, I think there's a clear question around the future supply of skills and labour from the EU. I think this then raises a second very interesting question, and that is how well will any post-Brexit immigration system step in to meet the needs of these sectors?
Public approval for Theresa May is also considerably low, as ORB's most recent poll found that just 22% agreed that the Prime Minister will get the right deal, while 59% disagreed.
The question is, how long will she remain as Prime Minister for? Well, it depends on what the settlement that she agrees upon with the European Union looks like. If it's reasonable, if British business, British industry, British trade is satisfied, if foreign investment, specifically the Chinese, the Japanese and the Indians, if they're satisfied, then I think that Theresa May's stay in Downing Street will be prolonged. However, I still don't believe that at the next general election she will remain leader of the Conservative Party. I suspect she will be gone before the next general election, which of course will be in 2022. However, if her settlement with the European Union is not approved by British business, industry, trade, foreign investment, then I suspect that's when enough Conservative MPs will call for a vote of no confidence in Theresa May. In that scenario, I suspect she would lose, and of course that would pave the way for a leadership contest in the Conservative Party.
Citizens' concerns about the grim Brexit outlook also correlates with official and unofficial studies, which almost all conclude Brexit's negative impact on the British economy. The UK's Treasury Brexit's damage to the productivity of growth is equivalent to 6% of the GDP. It points out a reduction in the UK's openness to trade and investment after formal Brexit. Some other studies, such as ECD, Rabobank, CEP and CPB, also project Brexit's permanent impact on growth in the UK's technological capability. In November 2017, academics affiliated with the Centre for Economic and Policy Research modelled how the UK economy would have grown had the referendum gone the other way. In October, they increased their estimate of the cost of Brexit to 2% of the GDP, or about £35 billion from 1.3%. Studies also point to Brexit's negative effects on living standards across countries. According to a research by the London School of Economics and Political Science, Britain and Ireland would be hit hardest by Brexit effects. High-ranking political figures also remain mired in infighting, presenting competing visions. Supporters of a so-called soft Brexit would keep Britain closely tied to European economic rules and standards so as to minimize disruption to trade. The hard Brexit camp backs the opposite approach, quitting Europe's customs union and single market and freeing Britain to draw up its own trade rules. However, reports suggest the government's secret plans for a soft Brexit in practice.
I would say that the European Union has the upper hand. Why? Because Brussels is not going to bend the rules. Brussels is not going to jeopardise the pillars of the European Union for Britain. Indeed, Brussels wouldn't do that for any other country in the European Union that is wishing to leave the economic bloc. So, given that, I would say that Britain is going to have to compromise. Nonetheless, I think that the EU is going to have to strike a deal with Britain, because the EU, though it will remain a very important, global, powerful economic trading bloc, it doesn't want to jeopardise its economic relations with Britain.